Wow.
Let me ask the question that's on everyone's mind. What was the first airplane flight you ever took?
Let's see, I was 7 years old. I grew up in Western New York outside of Buffalo, and we flew to Washington, D.C. for a visit to the White House. 7 years old. That was been 1967 on a United Airlines aircraft.
So this was preordained, the whole thing. The Washington, D.C., the visiting the White House?
Yeah, probably not. No, I still do recall the White House visit, though, and I was 7 years old. It was phenomenal.
You know, I asked that question because I think for so many of us, that first flight, that first experience was so inspiring. I was 8 years old. I flew from Dayton, Ohio to California to visit my grandparents, and I thought, this is the coolest thing in the entire world. And so I have to tell you, little Susie could not have imagined being here today with the leaders of this industry.
Yeah, what's amazing to me, if you think about the industry, is only about 20% of the world's population has ever set foot on an aircraft. Think about that, 20%. Think about what that means in terms of growth for the industry over the coming decades as we continue to see globalization take hold. It's an amazing industry, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of it.
So we were just hearing from the governor about the types of pro-growth policies that are really needed in order to fuel this industry and others forward. As you're leading RTX, how do you think about that, both the public policy risk and opportunity? How can government help and hurt?
Well, certainly the business needs stability. We need consistency of regulation. We need a consistent voice and a consistent direction. I think about today here in Washington, we're about to go into some serious negotiations around the budget. What does that mean in terms of, will we have a continuing resolution? Will we have an omnibus agreement? What does that mean for defense spending? What does that mean for other policy issues? What does that mean for FAA refreshment in terms of the air traffic control system? All of these uncertainties drive us crazy, and I think that is the biggest challenge that we have, is the lack of certainty. And it's not just in the U.S. Obviously, as it goes to Europe, it goes to Asia as well. But here in the U.S., it's particularly acute because the U.S., as we'll all recognize, leads the world from an aerospace policy standpoint. So we have to make sure that we have a clear set direction, whether it's FAA, refreshment of the air traffic control system, whether it's a clear mandate in terms of defense spending and where we're going to be going in the next decade. Again, we just value certainty, and we don't have it today.
It's probably the thing we hear about the most from small companies, big companies. It's certainty, wanting to make a plan. You know, the last time there was a government shutdown, I met a fisherman, and he had just bought a new boat. And his problem was that he needed his fishing license, and he wasn't going to get it because of the shutdown. And he knew it meant he was going to miss the season, and he was going to lose his boat. And I think it's easy for people to say, the government's really big, shut it down for a little bit, it'll lead to efficiency. And we don't think about not only the big company aspects of government shutdown, but also how it impacts a small business.
Well, look, we see it, today in the major cities where we have offices that are empty. And it's not the office workers that are suffering. It is the small businesses that support those major downtown areas. And again, I think about the same thing with the government. Sure, we can shut the government down. The government employees will all get paid. But what about all of the small suppliers, the people that own the restaurants, the delivery services, the dry cleaners? What happens to them? And I think, we oftentimes, in a full stop, we all recognize there's waste in government spending. But at the end of the day, I think, again, having certainty of continuity of government, having certainty in terms of here's the priorities is absolutely essential. And stopping and starting the government is just not a way to run a ship.
You wouldn't consider making up your margins by just closing for a couple of months?
Well, look, I could stop investing in R&D. Right. We spend $2.5 billion a year of company-funded R&D. I could increase the profitability of RTX by an order of magnitude simply by stopping investing. That's not what we're going to do. We're in business for the next 100 years. As we've been in business for the last 100, we focus on the next 100. So I think there are a lot of short-term solutions, but they're not really solutions. It's not the panacea that you think it might be.
I think That's right. It's why I think Governor Youngkin's right. We want to see more business leaders in government, people who will come up with a long-term strategic plan. Let me ask you a question about one more public policy issue, one more challenge, and then I want to turn to opportunity. On a challenge question, we hear all the time from small businesses, big businesses, every industry, every geography about the worker shortage, about a real problem in finding skilled workers, workers at every level, quantity and quality. How is that impacting RTX?
So it's interesting. We have been very fortunate to be able to add to the workforce over the last couple of years as we've come out of the pandemic. When we went into the pandemic, we had just under 200,000 employees. Because of the commercial aerospace downturn, we actually lost about 25,000 employees. We've been fortunate where I think we're back to 187,000 today. And last year, I think we hired 32,000 people. Now, that sounds like a big number, but we also had 25,000 people leave. Again, we're fortunate. We're at the very high end of the pay scale. We're at the high end of the technology roadmaps. We can attract great talent. And I actually don't worry about attracting talent so much at RTX. What I do worry about is those 14,000 suppliers I have and their inability to hire, train, and retain the talented workforce that you need for the aerospace ecosystem. And that, to me, as I think about the biggest challenge in aerospace today, it's not the major companies. We have the balance sheet, we have the technology, we have the people. It is those 14,000 suppliers that I share with every other aerospace and defense company out there. And the health of those suppliers is wholly dependent on their ability to attract talent.
You know, the Chamber, I'm just doing a quick commercial. We recently launched a prompt pay pledge suggesting that big companies take their smallest supplier and reduce their payment terms to pay them as fast as possible. And so
let's not get crazy here, Suzanne.
No, I know. Obviously, I'm not looking at you, but anyone who wants to look at our website on the prompt pay pledge, I think could help us out. But
just to that point, you know, you raise a good point because liquidity is a problem in the supply chain. We actually have been working for the last 15 years with Citibank to have a prompt pay system where the suppliers can get paid within 15 days of presenting an invoice by Citibank versus our terms, which are typically 60 to 75 days. So it's a real issue, but there are solutions to that.
Exactly. You're doing better than we are, so we should be highlighting you on the website. So let me ask you a question. It strikes me as we talk about you running the leading aerospace and defense company that there's both romance and strength in that, right? Governor Youngkin talked about the romance of children all over the world dreaming about rockets and aerospace, and also, you know, children all over the world relying on what you can do in terms of defense. And so when we think about the importance of innovation, we think about the importance of opportunity, I can't think of a more important industry where we're all counting on and dreaming about innovation that can come. And so how are you thinking about innovation, change, opportunity?
You know, it's a great question, Suzanne. Now, and again, the mission of RTX is actually pretty simple. We talk about connecting the world through commercial aerospace and defending democracies across the world. And those very simple words lead to an incredible amount of technology, know-how, and the precision systems that we have been able to develop. I think about the people of Ukraine and what we have been able to do with our air defense systems, whether it was the NASAM systems we put in last fall, the Patriot air defense systems that we just put in a few months ago, some of the other very, very high technology products, Stinger anti-aircraft, the Javelin anti-tank missile. All of those things were built, designed to make sure that we could present a unified defense across NATO. And the fact that we can actually deploy these things and save lives every single day, it is an amazing, amazing benefit that we have as I think about RTX and all of those great things that we do. But it's also a challenge because as I think about, you know, how do you go and develop the next generation? What are we going to be doing next to, again, think about how do you defend democracy? We know hypersonics are a huge challenge, and we have solutions. But again, it's those investments and it's that technology, and we don't build these products to start a war. We build these products to try and prevent war by having a deterrent effect that people know that they cannot attack us and win. And that is it is a noble challenge, and it's one that I think the 186,000 people of RTX wake up every day and say, that's why I'm going to work.
It's really inspiring. And I'll tell you, just as we spend time with the guy who was running the AmCham in Ukraine before the war, different Ukrainian businesses, American businesses operating there, I think it's possible that they can describe your products as well as you can. I mean, they're really aware of what it is that's allowing them to continue to support their families, have a business, have any sort of a life during this onslaught.
It was interesting. We were with the Ukrainian ambassador a couple of weeks ago. She presented us with these coins freshly minted from Ukraine, which have the Patriot air defense system on the back. It is a lifesaver. It is the reason that people can still go about their daily work in Ukraine, because we provide this kind of protection. And it's a challenge, but it's an honor to be able to do that.
One of the things we talk a lot about at the Chamber is how businesses solve problems, and how in an era where governments around the globe can be gridlocked and stymied and engulfed in political outrage, it's business leaders frequently stepping up and figuring out how to solve big problems. And one of those issues is certainly sustainability, and an issue that faces this industry in a particular way. And you know, you don't become the CEO of the U.S. Chamber thinking that there's a government solution to this. You become CEO of the U.S. Chamber thinking there's a public-private partnership solution to this. So how are you thinking about sustainability?
So as I think about the challenges of aerospace and defense, I would tell you there's three S's. It's safety, supply chain, and sustainability. Each one of them has its own challenges. Sustainability, however, I think we actually have pathways to a solution over time. You know, if I think about today, we're selling jet engines, and Boeing and Airbus making all these beautiful aircraft. Those aircraft will fly for the next 30 years. So does that mean we'll get to net zero in 2050? Probably not. Will we have a product line by 2050 that is capable of net zero? Absolutely. And when I think about sustainability, it starts, at least in the near term, with sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. Again, it's a partial solution. There's not enough of it out there. We're working on hybrid electric propulsion technology. Eventually, we'll get to hydrogen, although there are some significant engineering challenges there. But we are working across a number of different technologies to try and come up with sustainable solutions for the whole industry. And it starts with fuel efficiency of the engine, but it goes to how do you route air traffic more efficiently to reduce noise, to reduce pollution, and the time it takes to get from airport to airport. It also involves working with NASA. It involves working with the DOE, with DARPA, with the European Space Administration, with the European authorities. And these public-private partnerships are essential because, quite frankly, the investments are huge, the timeframes are huge, and the risks are huge in any single solution. But they are absolutely essential if we're going to make progress towards net zero.
I know we only have a few more minutes, but I want to pick up on that and say a question we get asked a lot is about nearshoring. It's about onshoring. It's about what did the pandemic teach us about supply chain resilience. And one of the things we say at the Chamber is if we learned that single sourcing is bad, that could mean Buy America can be bad too. Any single source is bad, right? Some kind of diversification feels important to supply chains. But how would you educate us at the Chamber and the people in this room? How are you thinking about resilient supply chains? So
there's a couple of different vectors I would think about a jet engine today. Our latest, the geared turbofan, is about a little over 8,000 separate parts. And there are roughly 3,000 suppliers. Of those 3,000 suppliers, we decided early on that we would not go single source on anything. And so what we've done is we said, okay, we will go to the lowest cost source for 75%, but we need to have backup capacity for the other 25%. And so we have taken I would say, a risk reduction approach with this supply chain to make sure that there is adequate capacity and redundancy. Now think about China. Again, we've got about 2,000 of our suppliers in China today. We also have about 2,000 employees and 5 factories there. There is no decoupling with China possible. What we have been focused on is de-risking. That is to find other sources outside of China for a portion of the supply chain that is now being met by the Chinese suppliers. Again, this is about managing the risk as opposed to just running back to the U.S. or nearshoring or friendshoring, whatever you want to call it. It really is about risk mitigation. And that's how I think about the supply chain is we cannot be successful if our suppliers can't be successful. That means they have to make a decent margin, they have to have certainty of the contracts, and we have to provide that to them. We've got about 600 people out in the supply chain every day helping our suppliers get better, learn process improvement, and doing all the work necessary so that they can evolve as we do.
We were joking with some industry leaders last night that it's making procurement sexy again. So let me ask you a question before we go. I've long had this theory that you have to be an optimist to be a leader, that it's really hard for people to follow a pessimist for any amount of time. And so you're leading a complex industry with a lot of challenges at one of the more uniquely complex times in history. What makes you optimistic?
Well, I think what makes me optimistic is I think about, again, I go back to the mission of RTX. And when I go out and I see what's going on in our factories, when I see what's going on in our engineering centers, when I see what's going on in the classified spaces where we develop these new technologies, it just gives me such hope that we are going to evolve into not just the company we are today, but the company that can be even greater in the next decade and century to come. And again, it's the bright, shiny eyes of the people that work for us that give you the motivation. There are tough days. We had some pretty tough days recently. But I'm wholly optimistic about the future, and I think you have to be when you talk to our people, and it really is about the people.
Well, it's exactly what makes me optimistic, is getting to meet leaders like you. Thank you for doing this morning. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Suzanne.